Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for the new moon in Pisces happening on the 17th of March at 26 degrees of Pisces at 8:11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And so I believe in most parts of the world it will be on the 17th. I don't know about you Australians out there. In any case, I want to mention a few points that the late Jan Spiller made about the new moon in Pisces based on her book, New Moon Astrology. And the subtitle is Using New Moon Power Days to Change and Revitalize Your Life. When I got this book, I think I ordered it from Amazon, and I was very sad to learn that she had passed away, actually. And so I guess she left us this wonderful resource. And I always like new moons because even if it's just symbolically, we think about the things we want to bring into our reality. And it's almost like having this mini new year every month, isn't it? I'll talk about those new moon intentions in a moment. I want to briefly touch upon other things that are happening at the time of this new moon that may enhance or challenge our ability to make these necessary changes. So we have, obviously when there's a new moon, that means there's a conjunction between the sun and moon in whatever sign we're talking about, 26 Pisces. Mercury is already in Aries, so Mercury is ahead. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of fiery energy because Venus is in Aries as well. Actually, will be a conjunction with Mercury at that time. And Mars is at 29 Sag, so very close to Capricorn, but still in Sagittarius at that critical degree. So basically, looking at some of the aspects for this day, there are wonderful trines from the sun and moon to Jupiter, which can be very good for attracting financial blessings and luck in general, expansive emotions, expansive ambitions, but in a positive sense, something that not just to feed your ego, but something that you want to make yourself happy at the core level of yourself. And there are a couple of squares from the sun and moon to Mars. So this could be fairly volatile in the sense that you have the moon and Mars squaring off. And whenever you have something like this, and one of them is in a fire sign, fireworks may ensue. However, I feel like one of the biggest aspects of this, which can make things rather difficult, is that Pluto is involved in a couple of issues here. There's Venus is squaring Pluto, and so is Mercury. So power plays, especially in relationships, and with the moon squaring off with Mars, people may be acting on emotion. And even though this isn't a full moon, people, when you start to get into that Aries energy, because we're talking about at the tail end of Pisces on this March date. So basically, there may be a lot of people who are kind of wanting to take action prematurely. Aries is very rash, and with Venus in Aries, especially with relationships, people may be chomping at the bit to do something that is working against their best interests. Venus is also about your values, and so you don't want to do anything that goes against what you really value, what you really believe in. And Mars in Sagittarius is all about doing the right thing, being truthful. One thing that I like is I was looking at Neptune, and it seems like we have kind of moved out of that phase of a lot of hard angles to Neptune. And that created, well, I mean, there's some inconjunctions, but I'm talking about some of the bigger angles that are more connected to a lot of conflict, like a square and opposition. And that, I think, led to a lot of problems in perceiving the truth, having a lot of confusion. It's very difficult to take action when you don't even know what's really going on. And in terms of new moons, it's very important to have clarity, because if you know anything about the law of attraction, you have to be very clear on what it is that you want. If there's any kind of fuzziness, maybe ambivalence, that can work against you. So let me go through some of the themes of Pisces that may relate to things that you would like to change. I find this actually quite fascinating, and I have certainly, you can always find something to learn. One thing that she talks about is that Pisces rules elusive states. So these are states that, states of consciousness that are not what we would consider concrete, or it's the Neptunian influence. And she mentions confusion, sleep, fantasy, imagination, and chaos. And all of this is what we would associate with Neptune, the 12th house, the unconscious mind, fantasy for sure, the imagination. And so some of the things you can ask for or hope for are getting proper sleep. And by the way, I just want to say it's not just about wishing. I don't really like the idea of wishes sometimes, because it makes it seem too passive to me, like you cannot contribute to that. You may set intentions of what you're going to do. Maybe that's a better way of looking at it. She uses wishes in here, but I'd say set intentions. If you know that you don't get enough sleep, ask yourself, why is that? And if it affects you adversely, say, what trips me up? Do I just simply stay online well into the night, and then my melatonin doesn't get produced because I got this bright light, and melatonin needs darkness in order to start producing? And looking at it logistically, what can I do to change that? And also, how do I lie to myself? How can I become more realistic in my dealings with other people and my expectations? Do I have a tendency to lapse too much into fantasy thinking? I'm not talking about really visualizing on a regular basis, but that kind of overly romanticizing, or any kind of way that you may unintentionally be deceptive with yourself, that you may want to change so that you can have a more reasonable set of expectations for anybody or anything. Sometimes there are people, and I can see it in their natal chart, where they might have a square from Neptune, from the moon to Neptune, for instance. And they may never be really happy in life because they always have this fantasy version of what something should be like. And reality always pales by comparison. But that's only because I think some people aren't used to just living in the here and now, and or maybe they're perfectionists. I think maybe that's what it is, that certain people can't bear for something to have a flaw in it, or a person. And if a person isn't completely perfect, and if they can sense that they have some flaw, then they just are not interested in them anymore. I would think in some cases this is that polarity between Pisces and Virgo, where they can sometimes mimic each other in terms of some of these themes. And definitely Virgo is a perfectionist. So I'm sure that with Pisces, it's that idealism that comes into it. But really, if you want to break it down, I believe that people who do something like that really don't accept their own imperfections either. And so it's almost like rejecting their flaws and thinking that they need to be other than what they are in order to be loved, in order to be accepted. And that's just not true. Another area that she talks about is spiritual healing. And so just as something as simple as having quiet time, and quiet time not meaning a time where you're watching videos or even necessarily listening to music. It could be a time when you just are absorbing the silence, as much silence as you have in the modern world if you don't live in the middle of nowhere. But we tend to always need to be distracted, and that can not only add stress, but it also feeds more need for being entertained or just distracted by something external. And meditation obviously would fall into this spiritual healing. She talks about spiritual purification, which is very interesting. So I'm assuming it means something along the lines of, she mentions yoga, so things like that. But again, how many people have, a regular program, maybe some things that they do on a daily basis that connect them to the intangible realm? And, there are a lot of people who go to the gym and work out religiously, but they may not deal with anything that has to do with their spiritual life. And there are two more things that I want to mention that she talks about. And one of them is about compassion and forgiveness, understanding. And this is one that a lot of times I get comments about because people really don't understand what forgiveness really means. There are still people that think it means that you minimize what the person has done. Maybe you try to make it okay in your mind, and that you are associating with this person and things like that. No, you don't even have to associate. It's basically where you can look at that person beyond the action that they did against you and see them in their totality as children of God. And I'm talking about even if it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, they're still human beings. And if you know any of their life story, if they were victims of abuse, then you can put that in the proper perspective and see how that event warped them and made them try to, feel powerful or whatever it is that motivated them to abuse you, and are able to feel compassion for that way of thinking that actually is injurious both to themselves and others, and to wish them well, wish them wholeness, and not allow yourself to be poisoned any further by whatever they did that was so egregious. That's all that it means. It doesn't mean that you ever have to talk to them and say, I forgive you, and do some dramatic thing like that. You don't have to if that doesn't feel right to you. And the other thing, too, is the issue of not feeling like a victim, because Pisces can lead, just that influence has the shadow of feeling like you're a victim in life, feeling like you can't, you're not self-empowered, that that leads to procrastination. She mentions panic attacks, which is interesting, and addictive behavior, because addictions are a form of escape. And when a person is trying to make themselves feel better, but they're not taking direct action, it's easier just to kind of numb yourself out in order to be able to tolerate a negative situation, when in fact, it's just prolonging the agony. It's much better to take action, even if it's scary, and extricate yourself from a negative situation than it is to numb yourself out and stay there. But, so I could go on and on, but I just wanted to bring up some of these points of ways that we can look to see how we trip ourselves up, because that's what the 12th house, that Pisces and Neptune rule, is about: self-undoing and things that we do that work against us. And whether it's a bad habit, whether it's a negative thought pattern or attitude, like some people, it's not just that they have negative patterns towards themselves and they think badly of themselves. They may also have these ideas in their head about life, these attitudes that are simply not true and actually work against them. And some of those things may need to be sorted out and understood so that the person can get away from those self-defeating patterns. And I'm always like thinking, okay, is it the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, or maybe both? But Pisces represents, I think that it's the unconscious mind. And so it's a lot of times people just are not aware that they're doing certain things because they're influenced by an event or events, deeply entrenched patterns, sometimes from a past life, because the 12th house, or Pisces, that represents karma, past incarnations even. Those influences could be affecting a person now, and they have no clue why they're compelled to do certain things, be with certain people that are not good for them, etc. And this is a time to bring all of that stuff that's below the surface to the surface and look at it as much as possible. And it takes the willingness to spend time doing so. Some people will just distract themselves with activity nonstop all day. And, the interesting thing about people like that is that they are the ones that tend to have trouble at night, because night is a time when we are sometimes forced to slow down. We don't have all of the distractions that go on during the day. So if you're the type of person who finds that as the evening progresses, you become more anxious, that could be a sign that you are being overly busy in an attempt to not think about certain things. And you might want to change that pattern as well. Okay, you guys. Well, I guess I'll leave it there. And I wish you all the best in this new moon. It's a final new moon of this cycle. And then we have our astrological new year. A few days after this new moon in Pisces, we have the equinox. And a couple of days after that, we have a Mercury retrograde on the 22nd of March. So then we're going to be reviewing certain things in our lives, depending on what house it falls into your particular chart. And also, you may hear from people in your past, so be prepared for that as well. Okay, take care. Bye.